Did Chad basically admit he's guilty? We've got a lot to talk about day 3 of the Chad Daybell trial. So much to cover. And we also have day 4 to cover as well. We'll do that in another video specifically because day 4, there's a lot of religious stuff, and prior, no surprise, got a lot of it wrong. So we're going to talk about all that Mormon-y Latter-day Saint stuff that is applicable and what's not. And that's in the next video. This one, we're going to go all about the conversation Chad had with his daughter Emma as he's sitting in the patrol car and a bunch of other stuff. Today's chocolate is one of my family's favorites. It's Guittard milk chocolate chips. These are the ones, the big jumbo chocolate chips. My kids grew up knowing that these are the ones for eating, not for baking with. Welcome to True Crime, Faith, and Chocolate. I am your host, Annette Lyon. I am a true crime junkie, woman of faith, and USA Today bestselling author of the suspense novel Just One More and a whole bunch of other stuff. Wanted to start out with a viewer shout out. An awesome comment left by Tia Joy B. She said, best explanation on where Daybell doctrine deviates from LDS doctrine that I've seen yet. Thank you very much. So thank you, Tia Joy B. I really appreciate that. That is really why we're doing a lot of this. Because yeah, I think it's fascinating and disturbing and clarifying. The case will make a lot more sense if you know where they're going off the rails. Whether or not you're a religious person or not, I think it's useful to know what's going on in their heads, or what should have been, or what used to. To respond to one other comment, I won't quote it, but one viewer basically said that I talk too fast and to please slow down. And a couple of thoughts on that. I know I talk fast. It's a genetic thing. It runs in my family. Good luck trying to get a word in edgewise if there's 3 of us sisters chatting. At the same time, there's so much to get through. I don't really want to slow down either, because I want to cram as much as I can into a short space. So if I am talking too fast for you, just go ahead to the settings and slow it down to 0.75, 0.5, whatever. Or listen faster, Ooh, one piece of really good news though is that the court has their act together now, and freaking hallelujah, the feed is so much better. You can hear it and you can see better too. They now have 4 screens instead of 3. So they've split it off so this projector has its own. You still can't always see what's on the projector. Sometimes you can, but the whole everything is so much easier to see and hear. So if you were frustrated before and didn't want to tune in, maybe there's some good news and you can now, or just wait for me to do recaps, right? You don't need to necessarily watch it yourself. 7+ hours a day, I can do it for you. Just news-wise, anyone who's interested, there is a public memorial for JJ and Tylee that will be held, so look at the information up here. It will be held on April 27th in Idaho Falls at the Colonial Theater. Visitation begins at 11 a.m. and then as the service itself begins at 1 p.m. The public is invited. Seating is first come, first served, but it will be live streamed through East Idaho News. So I wanted to pass that along for anyone who is interested and might want to tune into that or even show up. So the first big focus of day 3 was a long conversation that Chad had after he was put into cuffs, put into a patrol car. This is after he sped off from his daughter Emma's house, who lived kitty corner across the street. He has not yet been charged with anything. He's not officially arrested, but he is detained because the police believed he was trying to flee. And so apparently he and Emma chatted for like 90 minutes, and they showed about 20 minutes in different chunks. So it's hard to know exactly where in the conversation different parts happened. Some of what we see seems like, how did you go from this to this all of a sudden? And that might have honestly been a time jump. They might have been talking about this, and then the next clip we see is from 20 minutes later. Some of the things that happened in the Emma conversation that were interesting, just a couple of interesting notes, and then we get into the disturbing stuff. First, we learned that, so Chad is trying to explain to Emma how to work the telephone communications system in jail, and she basically goes, oh, I already know, I've been talking to Lori. Which I was like, oh, she was already talking to Lori and Chad didn't know that, which I thought was interesting. And then he says there's $9,000 in cash split between 2 envelopes, and you'll find it in this part of the house. He says oh, they're doing, they won't find anything in the house, which almost then dot dot dot, but they will outside, question mark. Like he knew obviously, but it almost sounded like that was a pause for a reason, or like he just left off the second half of the sentence. They're talking a lot about financial things, like how she can access his account so she can continue to pay the mortgage. And he said, if you run into any problems, let me know. And she goes, oh, I've had some luck with telling people my mom just died. So I'm sure I'll have luck if I tell people that my dad's in jail. And then she kind of laughs. I was like, well, that is kind of sad, but also probably true. Then apparently she was going to then move into the house. She's going to be put onto the mortgage. And there's talk about, letting certain brothers use different cars, or, that kind of thing. At one point she says Mark, her brother, is weird in how he reacts to trauma, is how she put it. And that she called him and said dad's getting arrested, or there's a search warrant or whatever, and he said, like, oh, I guess I should come home, and that was his only response. So I'm wondering, is this weird flat affect just like a Daybell boy thing? Like, did he get that from his dad? Is it a family culture thing? Is this genetic? Should we be worried that Mark is a sociopath on some level? Like, I don't know. Something that really bothered me though is just when they start getting emotional, or Emma starts getting emotional, Chad does not. He doesn't get emotional at all talking to his daughter. In fact, so over the course of what we heard, when she first sees him, it's like, oh, love you, and he says, love you too. But it's like this little lighthearted, like you would say to anyone, and you meet you see your mom for the first time in a while, oh, I love you. And then she, multiple times that we saw, says, oh, Dad, I love you so much. And he never says it back in those cases. And one time he specifically said, well, we'll talk. That was his response. And he'll do like his little nervous chuckle that you've probably seen. And you're just like, what the freaking heck, dude? Like, your daughter is literally sobbing because her dad is going away to jail, and he can't even muster an I love you. And I can tell at the very end, again, she reaches into the car to give him a hug because the police officer nearby says, okay, only have a few seconds, got to wrap this up. She reaches in to give him this big hug. He like basically leans in like 6 inches. Arms are in cuffs, but it doesn't look like he was participating in the hug, if that makes sense. And then his I love you there was just like he was hanging up on, on a phone call. Like, I love you. And she's crying. And yet we know that Chad is capable of emotion because earlier that day, this is before he took off on the car, he tries calling Lori at the jail, can't get through, and then she calls him back. And that's the classic jail phone call that you've probably heard, that you can find in many outlets. The call lasts for about 3 minutes. In that time, he tells Lori, oh, they're searching the property, and she has her little baby voice, oh, what can I do for you? And oh, it's a little weird thing. In a 30-second period, though, he says, I quote, I love you so much. I love you, and we'll talk soon. And then I love you when he says goodbye and hang up the phone. So that's the last 30 seconds of the call. He says, I love you so much. I love you. We'll talk soon. And I love you. So he could muster that, but not for his own daughter. That just made me mad. I was so frustrated. She actually asks, so how did Lori respond to all of this because he talked to her? And he goes, oh, well, she sounded bothered. She didn't sound bothered. She didn't even sound surprised. It was her little baby voice. Oh, okay, well, how are you? What can I do for you? Should I pray for you? It was this little baby voice. And then she goes, you look surprised. And I wanted to go, he never has any emotion on his face at all. That's his surprised face. Like, that's the same face he has for everything. So whatever. I can't believe you're going to jail, and how long is this going to be, or something like that. And his response is, I'm not coming back. And then he kind of chuckles, but as he says, he chuckles after almost everything. I'm not coming back. This is before he's charged with anything. He knows at this point that they have found the remains of one person. And because of where it is, I'm sure he knows it's JJ at that point. And then Emma at one point also was like, I tried to tell the officer that, well, we have dogs buried over there. And apparently the officer said to her, respectfully, I can tell the difference between animal bones and human remains. These are human remains. So, yeah. Sorry, Emma. She just really seems to be like it sounds like she eventually embraced Lori at some point as a family friend. He's helping us to heal. I heard that she had posted something like that online at one point. Now she's blaming Lori for framing her dad. So I don't know. I know as victims of the case, like if you're the child of someone who died of homicide in Idaho, then you're entitled to attend the trial, even if you're a witness. Every other witness in this case who's been subpoenaed is not allowed to even watch anything about the trial. They can't attend, they can't talk about it, they can't nothing. But if they're the children of the victim, an immediate family as Idaho defines it, they can attend and testify. I hope they're watching the trial, and I hope they pay attention to the evidence and don't just put their fingers in their ears and go la 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 la, because I think they need to know the truth about their dad. So about how their mother was killed by their father. One big thing that John Pryor decides, I've got a top 10 for him. Oh, holy moly. At one point, he was drilling Detective Joe Powell, or Lieutenant Joe Powell, on the stand about why he got the warrant to exhume Tammy's body. And everything I'm hearing, I'm like, Joe Powell's our hero. Like, he's the one who pushed to go, something's not quite right here. We need to look into this. There's too many weird things. And Pryor tried to make it sound like he was overstepping his bounds by trying to get, and getting the exhibition. Coming down, he drove down from Rexburg down to Springville, Utah, and attended the exhumation and the autopsy and the reburial, all of it. I was watching very carefully when they actually showed a picture of Tammy's body after it was exhumed. Still clothed. I think it was even still in the casket. And I was watching Chad's face. I didn't detect a single muscle movement. There was nothing. Absolutely no reaction to seeing his wife of almost 30 years lying there, who he killed. Pryor was going off about how, well, the coroner said we didn't need an autopsy. And I am hoping that at some point the prosecution brings up the fact that in Idaho, their coroner system is an elected position. I could run for coroner if I lived in Idaho without any medical background whatsoever. The coroner is not a scientific medical person. It's an elected position. So their opinion on a medical situation might not be the one that the police should necessarily, subscribe to. Oh, my top 10. Pryor's top hits. Ah! Okay, so Pryor's top 10 hits, David Letterman style, from day 3. So he's like, I'm pretty sure this is to Lieutenant Powell. So when you served the warrant in January of 2020, and he says, I wasn't part of that warrant. And then Pryor's like, oh, you weren't? Why did I think you were? And I'm like, okay, dude, you know what's going to be on the docket for today. You know which witnesses are coming. How about you make sure you know the basic facts of what happened? Who was where? Come on. Number 9. This is when there was a long recording. It might have been the Emma and Chad conversation. I'm not positive. But essentially he's like, oh, well, I have the exact same recording, but it'd be better and more convenient for me if we just used my version. And the judge says, well, no, we for the sake of, admitting evidence, it could be confusing for the record if we have duplicates. Could you please use the one that's already up on the screen? And he's like, well, it'd be more convenient if I could just use mine. And the judge is like, I am asking you to use the one that's already here. Please don't inconvenience the court. Great. This is the first thing in the morning. It was like some emergency motion. He's like, you need to. I know what it came down to was, I know you already ruled on this thing, but I didn't like your answer, so rule again. And then basically Judge Boyce goes, I already ruled, and I said no. Moving on. I don't want you to bring this up again. At this point, it feels like Pryor is like a toddler where you have to go, I said no. Mommy and Daddy both say no. Like, give me a break, dude. Stop. And okay, this is when going into why Joe Powell was trying to get the exhumation and the autopsy, and they, and prosecution did a great job of showing all of these different things that raise questions and red flags. Like, this is unusual. Let's look into it again, and let's forget the fact that the autopsy revealed that Tammy died of homicide. Okay, the autopsy was the right call. He says, "Did you look at the death certificate? Why didn't you look at the death certificate?" So what? He subpoenaed medical records. He was calling pharmacies. He was talking. I mean, he got all kinds of information, got a warrant, got an autopsy, got a result of homicide. Who cares if we didn't look at the death certificate? Like, what's the relevance, dude? Seriously. And his argument, Tammy didn't like going to the doctor, is somehow proof that she was sick. And I wanted to go, show me someone who enjoys going to the doctor. He's like, I know what I want to do today. Let's have some fun. Let's go to the doctor. Does anyone like going to the doctor? He didn't say she was afraid of doctors, didn't trust doctors, hadn't been to the doctor in years, even when she was sick. In fact, she had been 2 months before because she fell and hurt. I think it was her arm. I can't remember if it was the wrist, elbow, or what, but she hurt her arm and then went to the doctor for that. And then, she was prescribed some pain medication and got some steroid shots, and then she hadn't been back since. Oh, that's suspicious. She didn't like going to the doctor, therefore you shouldn't have gotten an autopsy because she didn't like the whatever, dude. He's asking this police officer. I don't think it was Powell. I think it was I think it was the one who actually pulled Chad over. Did you hear that Chad was going to go talk to his lawyer? Which, if you heard someone else say that, then that's hearsay. Instead of Chad telling him or him saying it or something like that, and he's like, no, I can't testify to that. I don't recall hearing any, And then later on, he says, well, I think at some point during the day, Detective so-and-so mentioned to so-and-so that Chad wanted to talk to his lawyer. Oh, so you do remember that discussion? Well, not necessarily the one you were talking about, and that's still hearsay. So, okay, dude. This is so bad. At one point, he had a piece of paper that was accidentally flipped over on the projector. And he's like, he tried to make a joke. He's like, oh, I was trying to pull one on you, apparently. The kind of joke in court where you're saying you're not trustworthy might not be the best kind of joke to make. Because sometimes there's truth in humor. Number 3, he says, you dug up Tammy Daybell without telling her family, without telling her children. Like, this is some horrific thing. And while, yes, it would be nice to know, like, if this happened to me, I would be devastated. But from a detective standpoint, when you're handling a case that is very sensitive, you don't know who was involved. If this is homicide, and it was, we know now, we don't know who was involved. You can't tell family because 90% of the time, family is somehow involved. So they couldn't tell family. And this is just a malapropism. What he meant was gleaning. Gleaning from this information. He said gleaming, as in like lights that are glowing, gleaming. I'm like, no, dude. Alex's modus operandi was being Lori's protector. He said this at least half a dozen times. Not even kidding.
You keep using that word. I don't think it means what you think it means.
For those who may not know, who aren't nerds like me, modus operandi is the method that a killer typically uses. You can say, oh, this particular killer or this person, our killer that we're looking for, it's the crime in this particular fashion. It's the way you commit a crime. The reason you do a crime, having a position where you title yourself a protector, that is not modus operandi. It's not. It's a different kind of pattern maybe, but it's not modus operandi. But not modus operandi, dude. That is not what that word means. I laughed again and again. The prior arguing that Tammy was horribly sick because she had a prescription for, I think it was tramadol. Again, that was for her arm pain from 2 months ago. She had anemia, which I'm like, a lot of women have anemia. Hello, especially during their time of the month. That's very common. Like, so that's not usually something you die from. There's a pernicious anemia, things like that. There are issues, but she didn't have that. Just basic anemia. Depression and anxiety. Well, yeah. If she's been living with someone who's emotionally and mentally abusive and cheating on her and messing with her head, gaslighting her all the time, maybe she'd be a little depressed. that doesn't mean that she's on the verge of dying in her sleep. So his arguments that Tammy was sick, that there was shoddy police work, all of this stuff was completely ridiculous. Just ridiculous. Ah! I can't. And here's the other little fun thing that I haven't brought up yet. That I learned. I heard about it and I thought, oh, I want to double check and make sure this is accurate. And it is. John Pryor himself has been convicted of SA, of a 19-year-old young woman in his law office. And he said, oh, it was consensual. Because a middle-aged man and a 19-year-old young woman, do you really think that power dynamic would allow it to be consensual? Not only just that annoying toddler and a yappy dog, but he's just rude and disrespectful. The final witness on day 3 was Nicole Heidemann, who was an FBI tactical specialist, and she began testifying about cell phone numbers, and cell phone data. One thing that I will point out that a lot of outlets I've seen, I believe, got wrong. We're talking about multiple phone numbers for one device, and over and over again, she says this number expired the day this other number began, and that happened like several times for several numbers, but it was not multiple burner phones. It was one such phone. So I got into about half an hour of her testimony on day 3, and then they dismissed for the day, and then they picked her up with her again right away on day 4. So we'll go into that in our next video. But then, yeah, Chad saying I'm not coming back was probably my biggest moment of the day. Definitely stay tuned for that one, where I will go into, the Latter-day Saint Mormon stuff they got right and completely wrong. Anyway, you want to tune in for that one. In the meantime, go have yourself some chocolate, because in the middle of all this bitter, you gotta have something sweet.